This video will explore the relationship between Steve McQueen and Sharon Tate, two popular Hollywood thespians. Steve McQueen was one of Tate's casket bearers, pictured on her front right side in August 1969. Why? Some people will say he was just a ham and was hamming it up for the camera at the 1969 funeral. But McQueen's presence on the Charles Manson hit list, supposedly Manson saved McQueen for last, and his behavior towards mutual friend Jay Sebring may give us some other clues. McQueen considered Tate one of the most beautiful women he ever knew. The Manson family murders are some of the most famous killings in modern history. On the night of August 8, 1969, 4 members of the Manson family cult murdered actress Sharon Tate, celebrity hairstylist Jay Sebring, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, Folger's boyfriend, the Polish playboy Wojtek Frykowski, and visitor Stephen Parent. Sharon Tate held regular get-togethers at her home on Cielo Drive, and with her philandering husband Roman Polanski away, she did not want to be alone that night as she was 8.5 months pregnant. On the night of the murders, actor Steve McQueen initially agreed to come to the party. Although he didn't show up at Tate's soiree, McQueen later discovered he was on Manson's hit list. McQueen befriended Tate sometime during his marriage with Neile Adams. The two were married from 1956 to 1972 and had 2 children. Tate married Polanski in 1968, but was engaged to Jay Sebring before then. McQueen had a huge soft spot for American women in Hollywood who seemingly didn't belong. Growing up in rural Indiana, McQueen's mother was a prostitute, and McQueen never knew his father. He channeled his energy into motorcycle stunts and outdoor tricks around his grandparents' farm, which served him well in Hollywood, where he did all of his own stunts. He developed a love for Americana, joined the Marines, and donated to a wayward boys' homes for the rest of his life. When he was able to track his father down once he had the means for a private detective, he discovered his father was dead. The outsider status of McQueen was something both legitimate and groomed for the silver screen. It formed the basis for his affection for Anne Margaret, his co-star in 1965's The Cincinnati Kid, who was Swedish and an outsider to Hollywood as well. In Tate, McQueen would have seen a Texan girl, daughter of a military officer, somewhat lost in Hollywood and a horrible marriage. When we look at photographs of McQueen with Tate's husband, McQueen almost looks angry at Polanski, almost pissed that Polanski would engage in orgies and film Tate for future use. By 1969, McQueen had become good friends with his hairstylist, Jay Sebring, real name Thomas John Coomer. Sebring was the most famous celebrity hairstylist of the 1960s and an ex-boyfriend of Sharon Tate. Tate and Sebring had a bit of an odd relationship, and people remember them kissing even after they broke up, but despite their romantic history, the two remained close friends. In the late 60s, Sebring owned a salon in Hollywood on the corner of Melrose and Fairfax that attracted the chickest men and women in Southern California, as well as a long list of celebrity clients such as Marlon Brando and Henry Fonda. His salon had a secret entrance and private styling room, not just for his celeb clientele, but his many lovers, and potentially was a drug drop-off. Sebring is credited with bringing handheld hair dryers, then popular in England amongst women, to America, a tool he also convinced men to use along with hairspray, which was something previously unimaginable to the both militant crew cut and slippery Brill cream types, as well as the no-fuss, long-haired hippies. Sebring was not British, but Detroit-born, and chose his name based on a racetrack. Like McQueen, he enjoyed fast cars and owned a Porsche and Mustang Cobra. Not bad when his haircuts cost $1.50. Maybe money was coming from elsewhere. He famously layered men's hair. Game show host Bob Eubanks, the son of a barber, called it the Sebring look, and wrote that every young man waiting in line in a Hollywood nightclub had one. He styled and was close friends with Bruce Lee and Steve McQueen. The former taught him martial arts, while Sebring provided the latter with plenty of cocaine, much to Neile Adams' chagrin. Sebring was doing incredibly well in Hollywood, but that wasn't enough for him. He wanted to create a cosmetologists' union to protect the wages of many. Some biographers say Sharon Tate felt she was too young to marry Sebring in 1964, as they dated and he taught her to cut hair, while others say she was ready for marriage and the recently divorced Sebring was not. But either way, things changed between them when she filmed the 1967 horror comedy The Fearless Vampire Killers with director Roman Polanski in London. Polanski wrote in his autobiography that he bonded with Sharon during an LSD trip one night, and by dawn they were in love. Sebring, who was technically still dating Tate at the time of this film, was heartbroken, but gave his blessing and friendship to the couple after meeting Polanski. Whether Sebring pined for Tate or had an affair with her after she was married is up for debate, but his dedication to her is not. While Polanski was mad with Tate for getting pregnant and encouraged her to have an abortion, Sebring didn't have the same reaction. When Polanski, who admitted he cheated over the course of his 18-month marriage, extended a trip to Europe in August 1969, Sebring kept the lonely and heavily pregnant Tate company. The night they were killed, Sebring was shot first, allegedly for protesting over their captor's rough treatment of Tate, and was then stabbed 7 times and left to bleed to death. Tate begged her captors not to hurt her unborn child, to instead take her hostage, but they refused and stabbed her 16 times. According to Steve McQueen biographer Marc Eliot, Sebring invited McQueen to a party at Tate's house. As Eliot wrote in Steve McQueen, a biography, on the afternoon of Thursday, August 7th, 1969, Sebring went to Steve's house to give him a trim. Afterward, they went for some Mexican food at El Coyote in Hollywood. While they ate, Sebring told him there was a little soiree planned for the next night at Sharon Tate's rented house up at Cielo Drive and that Steve should come. McQueen had an intense eye for fashion and was a skilled marketer of goods. Sebring brought men's hair fashion into the fray for the first time. Director Quentin Tarantino, interviewed at length for Cutting to the Truth, commented that Jay was different. He created a market where there really wasn't one, not just a haircut, but men's hair fashion. Jay Sebring, Cutting to the Truth, is a 2020 American documentary film that studies Jay Sebring's life as the first international pioneer in the industry of men's style and hair. He is cited as the inspiration for Warren Beatty's character in the 1975 film Shampoo. Steve McQueen told Sebring he would be at the soiree. The next day, McQueen happened to run into his Magnificent Seven co-star, actor Robert Vaughn. While the two chatted, Steve invited Robert to come with him to Tate's party. Vaughn politely declined because he had other plans. Before he was set to arrive at Tate's house, McQueen received a phone call from a young and beautiful blonde he had been seeing. McQueen invited her to Tate's house. Keep in mind McQueen was married this entire time, but she told him she had a better plan that involved only the two of them. That night, Jay Sebring was murdered by the Manson family. The findings of the murder victims' toxicology reports was published in 1970. Here it is. The two victims who struggled the most fiercely with their killers a year ago at the home of actress Sharon Tate had a quantity of a drug known as super speed in their systems, the county coroner testified. The disclosure by Dr. Thomas T. Noguchi came as the prosecution at the murder trial of Charles Manson and 3 female followers ended its direct examination of the coroner. Noguchi performed the autopsy on the body of the 26-year-old Miss Tate and supervised the post-mortem examination of the other 4 victims. He said later toxicological examinations of the victims showed coffee heiress Abigail Folger, 26, had 2.4 milligrams of the drug MDA in her bloodstream. Her friend, 37-year-old Polish playboy Wojtek Frykowski, had 0.6 milligrams of MDA in his urine. Noguchi also said Miss Folger had a blood alcohol content of 0.05%. Another victim, 18-year-old Stephen Parent, had a blood alcohol content of 0.02%. The coroner said the other two victims, Miss Tate and 35-year-old men's hairstylist Jay Sebring, showed no signs of alcohol or drugs in their systems. Where did the psychedelic MDA come from that night? After McQueen found out about Sebring's murder, he immediately arranged for someone to go to Sebring's home and clean out all the drugs, sexual paraphernalia, and anything else McQueen knew Sebring would not have wanted anyone to find. Despite his efforts, both cocaine and marijuana were found in the Porsche outside the Cielo Drive home belonging to Sebring. McQueen gave Sebring's eulogy, and the press ran with the story that there had been a drug-fueled orgy at the Tate home that night. The crime was so horrific, Polanski believed it must have been carried out by someone the couple knew, and began casting a suspicious eye on some famous friends, even later admitting to sneaking into his friends' garages to test their vehicles for signs of blood. Did this include McQueen, the noted vehicle lover? Why was Polanski so suspicious of McQueen if Tate and McQueen hadn't been lovers and McQueen wasn't even there? Roman became a detective. Journalist and author Ivor Davis said in the new Epix docuseries Helter-Skelter, An American Myth, he thought for a few crazy moments that somebody in his inner circle was responsible for killing Sharon. One celebrity to rouse Polanski's suspicion was martial arts instructor Bruce Lee, because Lee was the only kind of guy who could kill 5 people single-handedly. And Lee and McQueen trained together. Polanski began to consider Lee could have been responsible for the slayings after Lee made an offhand remark during one of Polanski's training sessions, mentioning he lost his glasses. Polanski knew investigators discovered a pair of horn-rimmed glasses at the murder scene that they suspected could belong to the killer. Polanski may have thought that Lee had been motivated to kill the group because he was still somewhat of an outsider in the Hollywood scene and may have felt some resentment about his position, just like McQueen. Who would you look for? Somebody who is aggressive, who is capable of violence, who is actually skilled at it, who, for whatever reason, had access but might hold some resentment. The docuseries creators paraphrased Polanski's reasoning at the time. When Lee mentioned he had lost his own pair of horn-rimmed glasses, Polanski believed that could be the clue they needed to break the case open, and offered to take Lee to his own optometrist and gift him with a new pair of glasses. But the prescription was totally different. Lee was off the hook. 2 months later, in October 1969, police arrested Charles Manson and his so-called family for the Tate murders. Part of the evidence found by police was a hit list created by Charles Manson. The list was comprised of different celebrities that Manson wanted to kill. At the top of the list was Frank Sinatra, who was a client of Sebring's. Manson planned to kill Sinatra by having one of the pretty young Manson girls seduce and then kill them while they were in bed. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton were also on the hit list. Manson wanted to tie the two together and then boil them alive. You can learn more about Taylor and her filthy hygiene, perhaps inspiring Manson's wish, on this channel. Finally, Steve McQueen's death was going to be made to look like a suicide according to this list. And why not? White men end their own lives on a greater scale than any other demographic. They are inside their own heads the most, ruminating, and they receive the least pity, the least sympathy from society. Here was fatherless, largely motherless McQueen from a poor family, a military veteran, an outsider in Hollywood, and almost picture-perfect someone who would choose to end his own life. After finding out he was on Manson's hit list, McQueen was spooked. He had every one of his homes completely wired and burglar-proofed with all of the latest security equipment. He began carrying a loaded Magnum gun with him at all times. As Marc Eliot put in his Steve McQueen biography, no matter how safe and secure he made himself and his family, he could not shake the dark feeling of having come so close to death. A simple decision to get laid had saved his life. The girl who saved him has never been named, which is a shame since she is literally a lifesaver. In October 1969, Manson and some of his followers were arrested at Barker Ranch on suspicion of car theft. Less than a month later, Susan Atkins told her bunkmate she killed Sharon Tate. In December 1969, Charles Manson, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Linda Kasabian were indicted for the murders of Sharon Tate and her friends. All of them, except Linda Kasabian, were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. In interviews with Manson, you can say many things about him, but he doesn't appear to be stupid. Much is made of the fact that Manson seemingly wanted to spark a race war with the Tate murders and attempted to pin the murders on the Black Panthers. But almost nothing is required to start race wars. They happen all the time, every day, in every major city of the United States, and have done since the 1800s. So do we believe this motive? Sebring, in addition to being the hairstylist to Paul Newman and Frank Sinatra, also allegedly hustled drugs to some of the stars at his salons, earning him the moniker the Candyman. He was almost the perfect link to more of Hollywood if the Manson family could get their hands on him. Manson wanted to be a rock star, and according to Time magazine, ordered the murders of Tate and 4 others because the previous owner of her house at which the deaths occurred, Terry Melcher, a music producer, refused to make a record with Manson, and Manson was motivated by revenge. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi argued Manson was obsessed with the Beatles' White Album and thought its message was that he should start a race war by framing blacks for crimes against affluent white people. The race war was nicknamed Helter-Skelter after that song, and the fact that the word pig was written on the wall at the crime scene in blood was linked to the track Piggies. But, says James Buddy Day, a true crime TV producer and author of the book Hippie Cult Leader, The Last Words of Charles Manson, everyone involved in the crimes had a slightly different take on what happened. While researching the book, Day conducted interviews with Manson, who was still serving a life sentence, during the year leading up to Manson's death in November 2017 at the age of 83. And so Day is believed to be the last person to interview the infamous criminal at length. There are so many people involved in the Manson story, not one of them can say what really happened. No one was making decisions for the whole group, Day says. One of the people who offered Day a version of the story was, of course, Manson, who maintained his innocence until his death. I didn't have nothing to do with killing those people, he told Day in a phone call. They knew I didn't have anything to do with it. So the story Manson told Day about the summer of 1969 is one in which, unlike in the Helter-Skelter story, his role in the murders is relatively small. The story, as Day tells it in his book, is this. Charles Tex Watson was a drug dealer in Los Angeles who lived at Spahn Ranch with Manson and his followers. Watson stole money from another marijuana dealer, the Black Bernard Crow, who was also known as Lotsa Papa. Crow called Spahn Ranch to look for Watson. The deal was for 25 kilos of weed for $2,500, with Crow fronting the money for Tex's girlfriend Luella to conduct the sale. Now, don't let anyone ever tell you marijuana never killed anybody. Crow said he would keep Luella, a young white woman, in his car as collateral for the drug deal. Tex then fled with the money, and Crow blamed Manson, potentially due to Luella's statements. Manson was put on the line to talk to Crow, and Crow threatened to come kill everyone at Spahn Ranch unless he got his money back, which was either $100 or $2,500, depending on who you ask. The threat led Manson to go to Crow's Hollywood apartment. The two men fought, and Manson shot Crow in the stomach. Manson believed he'd killed Crow due to hearing about the dumped body of a Black Panther member after this, but he hadn't. The first time Manson saw Crow again was at the Tate murder trial. Author Day identifies this fight as a turning point. After, as fear of outsiders and retaliation intensified, Manson warned the ranch residents that the Black Panthers, a group to which he believed Crow belonged, were going to come after them. The Black Panthers had stormed the Sacramento Capitol building fully armed in 1967, in great contrast to the January 6th defendants, and had no problem getting violent. The Manson family had no reason to doubt Manson's story. Manson said, "Now we gotta fend for ourselves because the Black Panthers are going to kill us," says Day. At that point, with the Manson family falling further and further into crime, Manson had two problems. First, he's worried that the Black Panthers will take revenge for the drug dealer he believes he's murdered, and second is that anyone in the group can rat him out, especially Tex and Luella. So he comes up with a strategy of saying if everyone's willing to commit these violent acts together, it will bond us, and no one can tell on anyone. One cannot underestimate how aware Manson was of the Black Panthers, how armed they were, how active they were in California at the time. The dynamic of the group further changed, this theory alleges, when Manson invited the motorcycle gang known as the Straight Satans to live on the ranch, where Manson pimped out female members of the group in exchange for protecting the rest of the group from the Black Panthers. The Straight Satans weren't the only ones he invited to the ranch for protection. Another man who came around that time was Bobby Beausoleil, a wannabe biker who he'd met at the Topanga Canyon music scene. Beausoleil told Day he wanted to impress the Straight Satans, so when they wanted drugs, he volunteered to get them. He got them some mescaline he'd purchased from his friend Gary Hinman, a grad student at UCLA. Was Hinman one of Sebring's clients? After the Straight Satans complained that the drugs were bad, Beausoleil tried to get their money back. On July 25th, he and Hinman fought, and both were injured. Manson was called and came over with reinforcements. He slashed Hinman's face with a sword and fled the scene. Worried that Hinman would call the police, Beausoleil stabbed him to death on July 27, 1969. He then tried to cover his tracks in a way that Manson would have approved. Beausoleil wrote "Political Piggy" on a wall in blood and later told the police he had seen the two men who killed Hinman and they were Black. Mary Bruner, another former Manson family member, told the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in December 1969 that Beausoleil also drew a black cat paw print on the wall to suggest that the Black Panthers were responsible. When Beausoleil was arrested in August outside LA, Manson was worried he might spill the beans about the framed crime scene or what had happened with Bernard Crowe. Manson told Watson to figure out a way to keep quiet. Someone at the ranch hatched a plan to replicate a copycat crime scene to the Hinman murder elsewhere, so people would believe Beausoleil's story that Hinman's killer was still on the loose. A spot was chosen, a house on Cielo Drive, apparently one that Tex knew because he had gone to a party Melcher threw there. The gun Manson used to shoot Crowe was the same gun Tex used the night of the Tate murders, furthering the crime scene replicate story. When Sebring, along with Sharon Tate and two others, were butchered by Charles Manson's associates in 1969, up-and-coming men's hairstylist Jim Markham, Sebring's business partner, took over his successful chain of salons and over 400 clients. Revisiting the weeks that followed the killings is both painful and cathartic for Markham, fabulously wealthy thanks to founding 4 hair care companies, including Pureology's Serious Color Care, which he sold to L'Oreal in 2007 for $280 million, pocketing over $10 million himself. In the half-century since, Markham has mourned the loss of his close friend, Sebring. But according to The Hollywood Reporter, Markham also takes issue with the popular theory associated with Manson's infamous killing spree, Helter-Skelter. As Markham remembers, Tate's father, a colonel in Army intelligence, began working with federal agents on the investigation. The agents told Markham that they believed the killers were connected to the salon. Murder victim Folger also had a connection to the hair enterprise given that she was an investor in Sebring International. The salon was bugged, but ultimately that line of inquiry lost steam. Interestingly, when asked to name his favorite clients, McQueen does not number among Markham's. Did McQueen have an alternate Tate theory that disagreed with Markham's? Prosecutors alleged Manson ordered Tate's murder in hopes it would trigger a race war, saying it was a prophecy foretold to him in secret messages contained on the Beatles' White Album. But Markham disagrees. He insists the murders were the result of a failed drug deal. I don't want to get into the drugs, but I never bought into the race war theory, Markham told the Hollywood Reporter. I believe Manson had gone up to the house and Manson wanted to sell cocaine and marijuana, he said. He showed Jay and Frykowski the product. They were going to buy some of it, but the two of them beat him up at the gate. The next night, Manson sent the family up to kill them in revenge. This alternate version of the Manson family murders is consistent with another theory that fell out of prominence once the Helter-Skelter hypothesis gained traction, particularly given Sebring's alleged drug ties. I've lived with that for 50 years. I still believe that, Markham said, although he declined to elaborate further given that he is still in touch with Sebring's nephew, Anthony DeMaria, who is planning a movie about the murders. Quentin Tarantino's blockbuster, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, has reignited interest in Manson's cult and offers a revisionist twist to the family's murders. Spoiler alert, what if Tate had lived? The film stars Emile Hirsch as Sebring and includes a lot of drug use. Markham was slightly disappointed by how his mentor Sebring was depicted in the film. I thought Jay was marginalized and that upset me, Markham, who named his son after Sebring, admitted. They portrayed him as this sort of houseboy. This was a very powerful man at the time, definitely straight. Manson's targeting of one of McQueen's friends also leads to another question. Did Manson know Steve McQueen wanted to become born-again Christian, and did this irritate him? Did he know that McQueen would start his own film production company, which would have rattled Hollywood studios? What do you think?